So friends, in the previous videos we discussed about the anatomy of an agent, and we tried to visualize the components of an agent. For example, the memory, the tools that it acts upon, and how it observes the result, and what is the context. So we will deep dive a bit more into the tools section, like how they are connected with the agent. So act means call a tool. So in the loop, act step always comes down to one thing: the model calls a tool. Tools are how an agent reaches out of the text world and touches the real one. So you remember in the last video, we sent an message to the tool, or we invoked the tool for calculating or for searching the weather in Tokyo. So in this if we take this example forward, we will now understand how the tool is connected with agent. So tool is under the hood, and how does the model know which ones exist? So tool is a function plus a description, two parts, and the model never sees one of them. Only ever sees one of them. So the function ordinary code, that does the real work: search, fetch, calculate. And the description, the plain language information about the tool written for the model to read. The model never sees the code. So remember that. So what happens is, for a tool, what we call a tool is basically a set of functions, right? And these set of functions are the like that, like we define these functions. We define what will be what this function does in the description, and then we have the parameters, like what input it takes, right? So these kinds of information is the metadata of the function on this, and this metadata of the function is visible to a model. So model just has this information, and it decides like which function it needs to call based on the user input. So the interface is basically the name, description, and inputs. So these are the three things that is exposed to model. So what the name of the tool, what is the description, text description, like what it does, and inputs. So it's basically the metadata of the function, and this metadata is basically presented to a model. Or you can say that every time a user prompts, this information is already made available by agent runtime to the agent, to the LLM. So the model gets a menu of tools. At the start, the runtime hands the model a list of everything it can call, right? So just in the starting only, no, the model will make itself aware of the functions, all the metadata. And how it makes it aware? It makes it aware through the context. It loads all this metadata into the context. So agent runtime puts each tool name, description, and inputs into the context. So the model sees a menu of available tools, like a labeled toolbox. If tool isn't on the menu, the model can't use it. So if it's not in the menu, or its context is not available, then model doesn't know how to call it. So these are the some of the possible tools or functions that are available, like get weather, like something that we used in the Tokyo weather example, and then the search web, send email, or run some kind of code snippet. So how it picks the right tool? So it matches what it needs to what description offers. So model reasons about what it needs next. So it's very simple. Like you give it a prompt, like what you want, what is your goal, and then it decides based on the metadata, like which function is the most suitable. So LLM will decide. And for example, if I use the Tokyo example again, the thing is that you ask today's weather in Tokyo, and then it picks get weather, and it knows what input it needs to give, so it gives the input city as Tokyo. How a tool called travels out and back. The model asks by name. The runtime runs the real function, and the result comes back as text, because the text is something that is always um, understood by the LLM, and LLM understands this result. So first they call the function. So LLM emits the call by name, so it emits the call. The agent runtime is the one that is running in background, that actually calls the tool that LLM has requested, and that is to get the weather, and then it returns rain and 14 degrees Celsius, the result. Now this result is again actually, it is appended to the context, and model reads it in the next pass. So it is looping out, and this result is stored in the context, and in the next iteration model will be able to read it. Why do good descriptions matter? I mean, it's obvious, because you have to give the metadata as descriptive as possible for the LLM to understand clearly. So the function you define its description tags, so that you clearly represent like what this function does, so that LLM can understand it much better. So treat every description as a document written for the model. So two kinds of tools: read only and write. So generally we divide the tools into two category if we look from the security perspective, so tools like which are doing some search, reading a file, they are pretty safe because they are not actually manipulating data. Whereas the tools that are changing the data, like they are sending an email, they are editing a file, running a code, or maybe making a purchase on your behalf, they needs to be guardrail properly. The security parameters or configurations need to be checked properly. So right, because these are irreversible tools and they deserve extra care. So what are tools in one breath? Like tool is a function plus description. Model sees it as an interface. It picks by matching the description, calls out by name and inputs. That's all. So in the next video we'll try to cover like everything a model can see in each pass, and why it is a finite information. Thank you.